Hey, it's Joe Stedman. Let's talk about close combat. This will be the final phase of Advanced Squad Leader, my series I've been doing on teaching ASL using the starter kit. So this will be close combat, and let's get right into it. In this phase, any units that are marked with a CC, a red CC standing for close combat, will duke it out. They'll fight. These are units that are in the same hex, and it's very bloody. This is in real life where you rush into the same building. You've been shooting each other, now you rush into the same building, and you fight it out, close quarters. First thing you have to think about is ambush. So either the defender or the attacker can get an ambush. Now how's that possible? Well, let's say the attacker gets the ambush because he busts in the back door. The Germans are shooting out the front window. They don't see the Americans come in the back. That's your ambush. Or the defender can get the ambush. The Americans bust in the back door, expecting the Germans to be sitting there shooting out the front window, but the Germans heard them coming, changed positions, and maybe they're standing in the corner. Don't see the the Americans don't see them when they come in. That's the ambush. So we're gonna first attempt to see if there's an ambush. There's a procedure for that. After the ambush is determined, then you will take your units, line them up, and figure out how you want to fight it out. It's used, you use ratios, comparing firepower versus firepower to get a ratio. This is a little math, 1 to 1, 2 to 1, 3 to 1. Then there's that always confusing one that I don't like, that's in between 1 to 1 and 2 to 1, and I'll show you that on a chart. Maybe someone has a quick method to determine it, but I'm not very good at math sometimes, and I get flustered trying to figure out if it's 1 to 1 or 3 to 2 or 2 to 1. Close combat, if it doesn't, you get one round of fighting. If it doesn't end, you flip over that CC to where it says melee, and those units will stay in that hex fighting it out until the next turn, where they'll go through the whole procedure again, but you don't have to roll for combat. I mean roll for ambush. Units that are locked in melee, they cannot fire out of their hex, they're just stuck there. Now, other units can fire into the hex, and that's not always as crazy as you might think. I've done it many times, to where you may have a half squad in a hex with 2 or 3 full squads fighting, and you may sacrifice that half squad because you've got an opportunity to take out those other squads, those enemy squads, and I've done that. So the units will stay locked in melee until one side kills the other side. And it's a starter kit, so there's no prisoners or anything like that. So once the other side, one side is eliminated, then the thing comes off, and then they're right back to being those surviving units win, and next turn they're right back in the game. So let's look at some pieces, and I'll show you a little bit how it works. Okay, so here we have a basic close combat. So in the advanced phase, the Germans moved in and they caused this to happen. So if we take a look at what we got here, well, they advanced into a building, so the first thing that we're going to do is determine if there's an ambush. So in this case there is an ambush. The Germans get the ambush, so they're going to get to resolve their attack first, and if they win, the Americans get no counterattack. Well, we have 5 firepower versus 6 firepower, so it's not 1 to 1. It's going to go down for the Germans too. So for the Germans, they're going to have to do 1 to 2, and it's on the chart. Now the 1 to 2 number is a 4, and so if they roll 4, they'll cause the Americans to reduce. If they roll 3 or less, a 3 or a 2, they'll eliminate the Americans. Now the Americans have a 6 versus 5. That is a 1 to 1. It's not enough for a 3 to 2 or a 2 to 1. It's the same thing. They have 1 to 1, so they have to roll 5 to reduce the Germans, or a 4 to eliminate. So let's say that the both roll, nothing happens, they don't get their number, then you simply stack them back up, flip over the CC, put it to a melee. That's a basic one. Let's do a little more complicated. Let's say it looks like this. Here's the combat. We have these guys versus these guys. So attacker first determines what he wants to do. Well, he's going to stack them all up. He's going to say 4 and 5 is 9. Add the single man counter, who gets a 1 firepower, which is a 9. 9 versus 6. Well, it's not 1 to 1, but it's enough for 3 to 2. So the Germans will get 3 to 2, so they're going to need a 6 to reduce. Now, let's put this guy with him. The American has to decide, does he want to fight the stack? Does he want to fight the 4 firepower? Or does he want to fight the 6 firepower? And if it was me, I would probably fight the 6 firepower. 1 to 1. If he wins, 1 to 1, he rolls a 5, does the exact number, he'll reduce one of these guys, random determination, Yahtzee style. So if I roll a 2 and a 2, then they'll both reduce. If I rolled a 2 and a 1, he would reduce. So that's probably what I would do. I'd probably attack that, so he determines. Or you could choose to go against all of them, which you may have to do in desperate times. Maybe it's the last turn and you need to win this building in order to win the game, so you might be forced sometimes to take on a whole stack. But if there's, let's say it looked like this, you could do the same thing. The American could decide to say, well, I want to go this one and this one. Or you could say, I want to take both of these and go versus him. And as long as it's not an ambush, it doesn't really matter. Everything's simultaneous. So even if something gets killed by the Americans, they still get their chance to fire back. SWs have no effect in close combat. And if you're broken, you can still defend yourself at a -2. But you have no chance to attack. A leader can never be targeted by himself unless he fights by himself. So let's say it looked like, let's say that was like this, and the German player decided to stack it like this. He wanted to go, these two guys attack here, and these guys go one-on-one here. That was the determination of the German. And let's say it fails. Now it's the American's turn. Well, he separated them, the German did, so the Americans can then say, fine, I'm going to do this 4 to 1. That's his choice. So be careful if you break off if you separate your leader. Now, a leader's modifier can only be used if he's not fighting by himself. So a -1 leader is a good thing to have in close combat. All right, so here's the ambush chart. You have to be at least 3, so you each roll 1 die to determine the ambush, and you have to get at least 3 less than the opponent. So if I roll a 6, you have to roll a 3. Now here's the modifiers. If you're inexperienced, so if you're a green or a conscript troop, it's +1. If you're pinned, it's +1. If you're CX, it's +1. Those are all negative things. And if the leader's not alone, he can use his modifier. So that's a good thing. And here we got the close combat chart. So you figure out your odds, going all the way from 1 to 8 to 10 to 1. Right there, the bottom number there in the gray is the number you have to roll to reduce the enemy. If you roll less than a number, you kill the enemy. And here's the modifiers. Let's just go through the modifiers. The first one, versus, or buyer versus ambush. So in that first round, not during melee, it's either -1 if you are the person doing the ambushing, or +1 if you got ambushed. Versus a broken unit. If you're attacking a broken unit, it's -2, so it's easier to kill a broken unit. Versus a pin unit. Remember that pin unit only gets half his firepower on that first round. Or if subsequent rounds, if someone fires into there and pins somebody. Leadership, if you use your leader in combat and he's not by himself, you can get that modifier for the leader. And don't forget, if you're CX'd, it's always bad. You're exhausted, you're breathing hard, you can't catch your breath. So you're easier to kill and it's harder to kill people. So that's it for close combat. It's not very complicated.